My budget's going to give working people a fighting chance. It's going to create good-paying jobs. And we can pay for these jobs by reducing the deficit. We also have to ask the wealthiest and biggest corporations to begin to pay their fair share.
What does this budget do? Raise more taxes, spends more money, creates probably the biggest government we've ever seen in the history of the United States.
President Biden announcing his budget and sounding like a candidate for re-election. Let's bring in our roundtable. Time national political correspondent Molly Ball, ABC News political director Rick Klein, PBS NewsHour White House correspondent Laura Barrón-López, and Washington Post editorial writer and columnist Charles Lane. Welcome to you all this morning. A lot to talk about, and I'm going to start with you, Rick. Let's talk about what we just heard from President Biden, who made that budget announcement in Pennsylvania. That budget basically has no chance of passing, so this really did seem like a preview of 2024.
Martha, this is the 2024 campaign framework in real view. It is not about passing. President's budgets never pass. But the president and most of his party are happy to say, look, we can bring you lower prescription drug prices, lower insulin prices. We can bring you free community college, no cuts to Medicare and Social Security, and yes, higher taxes on the wealthy. They like what this says about the party. I've talked to White House allies that see this as an opportunity. The president will be out west later this week talking specifically about these issues, saying, look, this is what we can do. And they particularly like the contrast. They like that they can present something. They know that this puts Republicans on their heels because they don't have the same kind of plans.
Exactly. It puts Republicans on their heels. It's baiting Republicans for their own plans.
Yeah, that's right. Right now, President Biden can say, look, I've put out my budget. I've made clear what I'm willing to do and what I want to do, and particularly on Medicare and Social Security. And now he's saying to Republicans, show me what you can actually get behind, because the White House feels good, not only because they feel as though public sentiment is on their side, but because they right now are asking, can Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, even get all of his conference behind one budget proposal? Because we've seen already where the Freedom Caucus supports one thing, the Republican Study Committee supports another, and right now Republicans are not aligned on what they want to do in terms of budget cuts.
And Molly, more than the Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, we heard him talk there. He has a super slim majority. Pressure's on.
That's right. And this all comes in the context of the debt limit showdown, right, where Democrats do really believe that the Republicans have sort of painted themselves into a corner. They have said that they're not going to touch entitlements. They have said they're going to balance the budget. And the ball is in their court, at least from the White House's perspective, to come up with some kind of proposal, to come up with a budget proposal, and also then to come up with a debt ceiling proposal, because they have said that as they're priced to raise the debt ceiling, they do want to enact a lot of spending cuts. We have yet to see, to Laura's point, a suite of cuts or some kind of proposal that this very slim majority of Republicans can all rally around. And since there's not going to be Democratic buy-in on any of this, it's going to take the entire Republican conference to come up with something.
And Chuck, debt and deficit are very real problems.
Yes, they are. I mean, I agree with the panel that this is smart politics on the part of the president, but maybe not the greatest policy if it were actually to be enacted. The actual deficit reduction he's boasting is relative to a baseline that still has multi-trillion-dollar deficits out as far as the eye can see. When this debt ceiling thing finally does crystallize and the negotiations begin is when we're going to find out whether there's any hope for these two parties who are totally polarized to at least get us through this passage with some kind of non-catastrophic outcome, which is what we would have on the debt ceiling. And Joe Manchin has been sticking his hand up lately, offering himself as the man in the middle who is possibly going to make that happen.
And is that going to happen?
Well, it doesn't look very good right now because for exactly the reason Laura was saying and others were saying is that the Freedom Caucus has stuck its hand up and said we have this, swinging list of spending cuts that are our condition for a deal. And that creates a situation where Kevin McCarthy is going to have a hard time holding his caucus together.
Let's go back to President Biden. It was a good and a bad week. We had the bank failure, bad week, but good job numbers.
That's right. I mean, the White House right now is trying to focus on those unemployment, the low unemployment numbers, the jobs numbers, and say again and again, look, we understand people don't necessarily feel as though inflation is down, but that this budget proposal, as well as the things that you're going to start see implemented, like the prescription drug reform that Rick mentioned, like the infrastructure jobs that are coming through, that's what President Biden is trying to highlight all the way into 2024.
But Molly, the Fed is still under pressure to raise interest rates. How do you view that?
Well, because we have not seen inflation meaningfully come down despite all of the interest rate hikes so far. And that is a continuing, it's a substantive problem. It's also a political problem. We have seen over and over the White House touting these positive economic indicators. The whole State of the Union speech was about this supposedly great economy, and Americans don't believe that. They're not feeling it. People are very pessimistic about the state of the economy. They aren't feeling good. They're not feeling like, you know, the present is secure and the future is on a good trajectory. And so it's going to take a lot of convincing and potentially things changing. And given, you know, that the Fed rate hikes are in the interest of slowing the economy, potentially creating economic pain for Americans, that, you know, we could see things get worse in people's perception before they get better.
And Rick, let's talk about the Republican side. Ron DeSantis out there in Iowa and Nevada. It's even clearer now he's running.
I think it's clearer that he's running. It's, I think, as unclear as ever, though, what that means and what it means for the rest of the field. He has not lit the world on fire with his initial debut speeches. They've been what people expected, kind of workmanlike. I'm out here to represent the Republican Party. A lot of talk about stopping wokeness. Does it work in front of a Republican primary crowd that's really fired up this far out? Sure, yeah. But we don't know what kind of candidate are we talking about? Are we talking about a juggernaut, or are we talking about someone who is just offering one of several alternatives to Donald Trump? And where does that actually slice down? Look, I think Ron DeSantis is going to be a formidable candidate. I think we've seen that clearly in a range of local and national polls, but there's still room in this field for others. That's the sense, even with a couple of other names like Larry Hogan, less likely to run or bowing out, there's still room in this field to have some additions.
Is DeSantis a natural campaigner?
No. Short answer is no.
I kind of knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, I mean, and this has been the knock that started to form in Republican circles, that, okay, we know what he's done in Florida, but has he taken a tough question from a voter in Iowa or New Hampshire? Does he have what it takes once he gets attacked on a debate stage? We just haven't seen that from him yet. And the donor class that's very high on DeSantis has to be also just a little bit nervous. Can he be the one? And do they need to hedge the bets a little bit?
And Chuck, can he take this message outside of Florida? Does it work?
Well, he has a message that the Republican base loves on wokeness. And he's got a story to tell about the Florida economy, which is very strong. I took a look at his State of the State address, which ran through the whole laundry list of accomplishments and was staged like a State of the Union.
The front lines in the battle of freedom.
Exactly. And he was calling out people in the chamber there acting like President of the United States. But Florida's a big state where a lot of the campaigning goes on in the media. It's about TV and that sort of stuff. And his main interactions have been with hostile reporters, where he sort of stages these confrontations and comes off as very hard-edged. When you have to go into living rooms in New Hampshire and Iowa and win people over one by one, that is a skill set that, let's just say, he's going to have to develop and learn it on the job.
And Laura, former President Trump will follow DeSantis into Iowa. A new poll from the Des Moines Register found 80% of Republicans in the state view Trump favorably, but nearly as many, 74%, feel the same about DeSantis. Is this a sign that DeSantis could eat into Trump's base?
I think DeSantis certainly could. I mean, right now, DeSantis is running a primary campaign, which is that when you talk about Trump versus DeSantis, they are very similar candidates in that they're both running for that Trumpist base. They both have similar platforms: anti-LGBTQ, anti-transgender, which DeSantis calls his war on woke. And also, I was talking to a Republican strategist, though, in a swing state recently, who said that this may very well work in a state like Iowa, in primary states. But you get into the general election, and that type of platform, which is, a culture war grievance platform, is not necessarily going to work in swing states.
And Molly, a big variable for former President Trump, the investigations. The Manhattan investigation basically looks like there could be an indictment.
It looks like there could be.
That's the payoffs to the porn star.
That's right. And we know that there is also the Georgia grand jury very very close to something coming out of that. We have the special counsel, which has been more or less a black box, but we know that he is also moving very fast on multiple fronts. So this all creates a cloud of uncertainty around Trump, who is still, I think, the undisputed frontrunner for the Republican nomination, but whose campaign has gotten off to this sort of oddly slow start, right? We don't see him doing a rally every weekend. We don't see him out there on the trail really acting like he's competing for it. So I think at this point it feels like the whole campaign is in a bit of a holding pattern, you know, with the president not announcing his reelection yet. It's getting off to a slow start, but all of these investigations do create uncertainty for Trump, and we just don't know how that's all going to play out. I think we've seen in the past he's able to sort of weaponize his sense of victimhood and rally a lot of Republicans around him when you would think, you know, for any normal candidate, getting indicted is not a good thing politically. But up is down and down is up when it comes to Donald Trump. So we will just have to see how that plays out.
And Pence was down on Donald Trump this week. Former Vice President said his strongest words about Trump in a speech last night, saying, "President Trump was wrong. I had no right to overturn the election, and his reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day," obviously talking about January 6th. And I know that history will hold Donald Trump accountable. Explain that.
Yeah, and this was a startling moment last night at the Gridiron Dinner, which is a journalistic institution. Usually it's fun and jokes and skits.
He had a few jokes. Right?
He had some jokes, but then he took a hard pivot away from that and went deadly serious for a moment and addressed January 6th. I think it was directly responsive to what we saw this past week via Kevin McCarthy and Fox News, the very selectively edited, deceptively edited footage around January 6th. And then more importantly, more relevantly for this conversation, about Donald Trump. And to me, Mike Pence went as far as he's gone in saying that what Trump did was unacceptable, that there should be accountability and there will be the accountability of history. Of course, he's talking to a room full of journalists, so you can understand why the First Amendment rah-rah speech is something that goes over well, whether he brings that into Iowa or South Carolina in his upcoming travel. I think this is a bit of a recast for Mike Pence as well, and I think he sees where this field is developing, and if he's going to have an angle, he has to be deadly clear about January 6th.
And Chuck, very quickly, you've got about 15 seconds.
Well, after I read those comments by Mike Pence, I wondered if he really wanted to be the Republican nominee, because they're not going to play well with the Trump base. You know, he name-checked Donald Trump by name on January 6th, which is something other candidates have avoided.
Okay, thanks to all of you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.